Hey guys, Lori here, pharmacist. So I have my daughter here. This is Caroline Rowe.
Hi.
And she just had my beautiful baby granddaughter, first granddaughter, this December, mid-December. And we're going to share with you about what went on at the hospital, sorry about the dogs, just about, it was really a harrowing experience. I mean, I stand up here and make videos for you guys, and I hadn't experienced our healthcare system in forever. Neither had she, being unvaccinated. She's hardly ever been to the doctor herself.
In the hospital once.
Yeah.
In all my 23 years.
Exactly. So, but we got to find out firsthand how manipulative it is and how just they try to force you into things that you don't want. And even with me being a pharmacist, she's a pharmacy tech. So anyway, you were in labor with Mia about how many hours? 26?
26, 27 total. So
Yeah.
from the time that I felt labor started all the way up until I had her was about 27 hours.
Right. And you went to the hospital. You were going to do as natural a birth as possible. She had a midwife. She had totally uncomplicated pregnancy. I mean, everything could not have been better, really.
Yeah. No preeclampsia, no high blood pressure, no diabetes, nothing. So my pregnancy was perfect, other than I ended up being 10 days overdue with her. I was 41 weeks and 3 days total. But I mean, I had no complications. I had an ultrasound right before, because they planned to induce me originally before I went into natural labor, and everything was perfect with her. No problem, no excess amniotic fluid. I mean, my pregnancy was literally picture perfect.
Right. So you got to the hospital and you ended up having an epidural because you'd been in labor for so long. Which
Yeah,
you
I've been
really
in labor.
didn't want to go, but
No, I've been in
very
labor
exhausted.
24 hours at that point, so I hadn't slept. So there had been the day before, I'd been into labor. I started labor like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we went to the hospital like 12. So I'd been in labor a long time, and I was tired. I had not slept, and then once my water broke, I had been in the water in the tub, and I had to come out of the water at that point. It was per hospital policy. So I couldn't no longer be in the water as a form of pain relief, and that made a huge difference. So I was standing, having to deal with contractions. So that was the reason that I chose an epidural and chose that I just needed pain relief, because I needed to lay down. I needed to be able to chill out, because I didn't think that I was going to be able to push her out without it. I really didn't. I didn't think that I'd have the strength to do it.
Right.
So.
Okay, so where things started going south, Mia was born. And then I noticed right away after she was born 8 pounds, 5 ounces. And of course, we had denied vitamin K. She had was not vaccinated during her pregnancy at all with flu shot or Tdap. Neither had been tested in pregnant women, full of toxins. And then you had denied, did I say Hep B vitamin K, the eye ointment?
Yeah, all of it was denied.
So in the hospital,
and they knew that everybody was fine with that. It had been pre-discussed.
Everything was good. So Mia was born, but she had, it turned out, swallowed a little bit of amniotic fluid on the way out. And so I noticed when they were working with her that she had a lot of congestion in her lungs after birth.
So right after birth, and they told us that, she was right beside me, of course, and they were just telling us, she's got congestion, we're just a little concerned about it. We just want to get as much as we can out. So they were using a thing to kind of pull it out of her lungs. They were kind of beating on her back a little bit, just making sure that they got as much fluid out as possible to allow her to transition easier than if they'd obviously just left her alone. So about an hour later, you left because you went home after that.
I'd been there quite a while.
Yeah, you'd been there a while. So she left, and Mia hung out on my chest. I tried to breastfeed her, and she didn't latch on really. So the nurse, after about an hour, wanted to check her stats. So she hooked her up to the machine, and her stats were in the 80s. So her pulse ox was in the 80s, which is a little low. It's low. They wanted to be really up in the 90s with a newborn. So she decided to consult my pediatrician that I had picked for Mia, and wanted to just basically call and see if we needed to send her to the NICU. So they called him. He said, yeah, let's go ahead, send her up there, put her on oxygen to help her transition easier. Because she wasn't pinking up in her hands and her feet. She just needed a little bit of help, it seemed. So I said that was okay. So they sent her up to the NICU, and her dad went with her immediately up there. I didn't want her to be alone. We didn't want her, out of the room without us at all. So her
really out of sight.
Yeah, out of
because
sight,
fear
too.
that they would vaccinate her or vitamin K or something.
And thankfully, I'd had this conversation with my boyfriend about, you know, this is the reason we're doing this, and he was totally on board. So he went to the NICU with her, and I stayed down, and I think I fell asleep. So he had texted me. We, of course, were in communication. The problem was the NICU was across the hospital, and where I was in labor and delivery at the time, you couldn't just cross over. It's kind of, there's two towers. So they were farther away from me. So the ARNP had come in there at night and told him they were going to put her on antibiotics, and started telling him basically what they wanted to do. And he didn't know what they were talking about because he doesn't really know much about drugs. So he told them, no, you know, I want you to go talk to her. I want everything cleared with her before you do anything. So the ARNP came down to me in labor and delivery and basically told me they were going to put her on gentamicin and ampicillin and dextrose to keep her sugar up, because I wasn't able to breastfeed her at the time. And at the hospital, if she's on an oxygen level of like 4 liters, I think it's over 2 liters, she can't be breastfed because there's a possibility of inhalation and aspiration. Yeah. So I couldn't breastfeed her. So they put her on the dextrose, keep her sugar levels up, etc. So I told them that was fine. They told me, and they told Christian, probably 24 to 48 hours she was going to be in there. So of course I just delivered. I was exhausted and I just wanted to be out, and I wanted my baby. So we were just kind of trying to speed up the process on getting out of there. If that's what they wanted to do, whatever. So they told us they had one of her lungs, her right lung was a little gunky. They'd done an x-ray. It was just a little congested looking, you know, a little nasty. That was the reason for the antibiotics.
Well, because they couldn't rule out pneumonia. Okay, so now, just to stop briefly, so we've got gentamicin on board, which has some nasty side effects. The baby could have had an anaphylactic reaction, allergic reaction. We've got ampicillin. So we've already introduced 2 things. Oh, and plus dextrose. 3 things, excuse me, that a newborn baby normally would never have introduced into their body. All right, so I'm pretty concerned at this point, but go ahead.
So went to sleep. The next day I went down there. I had them wheel me down there to go see her and to see Christian because he had been down there all night. And so the ARNP came in and she was like, you know, the baby's on antibiotics and we just want to talk to you about doing a spinal tap. And we can't do the spinal tap unless we do vitamin K, and it's because we need to rule out meningitis. So of course Christian's beside me and he's like silently freaking out because he doesn't understand like why we're doing a spinal tap, what that even is, you know, what the reasoning, etc. So she explains to us that, you know, we need to think about it. She knows it's a lot of information, that it sounds scary, but it's not that scary, and we really need to think about doing this for her. So I go back to where I was now. I got out of labor and delivery and was in like the transitional unit. Went down there, and as we're walking, I was like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing vitamin K. We're not doing a spinal tap. This is ridiculous. Like, she doesn't need it. It's invasive. It's unnecessary. And so he was like, no. So I went down to the room and called Mom and told her what was going on. And of course she said, absolutely not. We're not doing that. You know, it's just ridiculous. So I talked to you on the phone, I think, and then I don't remember if you decided to come up or not. But
yeah, I came up, and at that point I also started juicing for her, raw juices, because even though she wasn't able to breastfeed, you were pumping.
Yeah, I was pumping to let my milk come in, and I was able to give her a little bit at a time. So she was kind of doing it through a dropper, kind of helping her get something in her system.
Some of the colostrum.
Yes, that wasn't dextrose. So I was pumping what I could, and at that point it was drops. I mean, my milk came in, I think later on that day, I want to say my milk came in. So
that was good. And yeah, so I started juicing for her. She was drinking 2 pints of fresh, raw organic juices. I was doing carrot, beet, kale, spinach, lemon, ginger, apple. I mean, it was because I wanted to literally push start that breast milk to where it was just so nutrient dense. That way, if the baby really did have an infection, her body could fight it off by getting that really nutrient dense breast milk.
Yeah. So we went back after I talked to my mom on the phone, talked to the ARNP, and we basically told her no, we're not doing this. We're not going to do the vitamin K. So they told us there's 24 hours. We had a 24-hour window that they could do the spinal tap and the vitamin K shot to be able to accurately tell if she had spinal meningitis. And they told me because if we didn't do it in that window, that the antibiotics may be working and it basically would wipe out whatever they look at in the spinal fluid to be able to tell if she had spinal meningitis or not. I'm guessing the bacteria. So we were like,
they did do a blood test.
Yeah, they did. They did a blood
negative.
test on her that came back negative. So there was a 30% chance it would be wrong and a 70% chance that it was correct. So there was that chance. So the spinal tap apparently was the 100% way for them to tell. So, you know, we still said no. So they were like, you know, you can still think about it, whatever. So,
and I think at this point we were having the discussion. Oh, I know, because at this point, didn't they introduce to you that if you didn't do the spinal tap, they would have to keep her? When did the 14 date come in? When did they start threatening you with having to keep her?
that was the time. I think you're right. Yeah. So they told me, you know, right now we were planning on doing 7 days because they told us they couldn't rule out pneumonia. So they were going to keep her 7 days for the pneumonia. So of course, we're in this NICU. I was about to get discharged. And then they said, so if they couldn't rule out spinal meningitis and we didn't do the spinal tap, I'd have to stay for 14 days with her. That's when that came in.
And at that point, I really felt like we were being manipulated and that she was being punished for not complying and doing the vitamin K and the spinal tap. And then on the third day, we sat down with the doctor. I had come up there.
Yeah, so she came in for rounds, talked to me. She said, did anything change? Do you want to do the spinal tap? I said no. So my mom came in and, you know, came to her as a professional, more or less, to talk to her about, you know, why they thought this was necessary, because they were still saying I was still within the window or whatever. So we sat down, talked to her. Mom had raised concerns about the vitamin K, about the Hep B, reasons we didn't do these things, reasons we were saying no to them, to basically say, you know, we're not crazy people, but these are the reasons that we are not okay with doing this to her because she's so little and because she was just born and because it's not necessary. So...
Well, and at that point, she told me that she was still encouraging the spinal tap and that she wanted to, that in all her years, that she'd never had any issues with the spinal tap. And I said, well, I understand that, but everything you're doing here is invasive. You know, I told her about how I was amping up my daughter's breast milk with the raw juices. And she just kind of looked at me like typical doctors do. They have no clue that nutrition has any role in anything because they're not trained in that. She went on to talk about the fact that we had denied the Hep B, or that Carolina denied the Hep B. And she said, you know, infants' immune systems are fragile. And I said, well, yeah, which begs the question, why are you hitting them up with a Hep B vaccination? And she literally looked at me and said, well, you know, I think it has to do with back years ago, there were women that were presenting positive with Hep B. And so they started giving pregnant women the Hep B. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Because if women are positive for Hep B, you can do a test before the baby's born. So you don't have to vaccinate.
Which were extensively tested. God knows I had 4 or 5 blood tests, peed in a cup every time I went to the doctor. I mean, they test for everything. They're constantly testing.
But the point being, this doctor cannot even give me a valid reason for giving Hep B at birth, which I have yet to find. I've asked 5, 6, 7, 8 doctors. I've lost count now. I have yet to find any MD that has any rationale. I've yet to find any healthcare professional that has any rationale. They just follow the program, whether the program makes sense or not, because we're not trained to think. We're just trained to follow. All right. So, and then also her blood work. She had a slightly elevated white blood cell count, which I pointed out. I said, well, you know, you're giving her sugar. She needs to be on breast milk.
Sugar feeds infection. I mean, that's common baseline medical knowledge. Sugar feeds infection. It feeds bacteria. So giving her sugar and her not getting the breast milk from the start and then possibly having an infection in her lungs, which we never really knew for sure, this could all be feeding it.
Well, she never had an infection. I'm going to say that. And that was another thing. I said to the doctor, I said, you know, this baby doesn't look sick in any way. I said, she's not running a fever. And she goes, oh, newborns don't run fever. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe they don't run like a high screaming fever, but I went home and like looked it up. That was total BS. I guess she thought I just didn't know anything.
So on day 4, on day 4, I woke up and I texted Mom and Christian because I, at this point, was staying in the NICU with her. I had been discharged from the hospital. I was staying in the NICU on a pull-out because I was not going home without my child.
She never left that baby. I
left for like an hour, maybe twice to shower. Literally to shower.
I mean, she never left the baby.
No. So I had
I'm so
decided,
proud of her.
I wasn't going home without her. It was just, that was my thing. I had this healthy baby and we were keeping her here. And at this point, I really felt like we were being held hostage, more or less. Like, I just wanted to go home. I wanted my bed. I wanted to be able to sit and breastfeed her comfortably. So before, on day 3, later on in the day, she had been tapered down on the oxygen. I breastfed her that day for the first time. And then, because they had been giving her my breast milk via tube, like she had a tube down her throat. And then later that night, on the 3rd day, she completely came off the oxygen. The nurse felt she was like okay to come off the oxygen. Her stats continued to stay pretty good. They wanted her to stay in the high 90s, so like 95 and above. So she was staying right in there. And then she'd dip here and there, but I mean, she's a newborn. It's bound to happen.
Right.
So on day 4, I woke up and I felt that I just wanted to go home. So I texted Mom and Christian and I talked to the nurse that was there. And the nurses there, honestly, were amazing. That, as much as the doctor and the ARNP were kind of a nightmare, the nurses were not. They were amazing. But I told her, I want to leave AMA, which is against medical advice. I said, I feel like I'm ready to go home with her. I don't feel that this is necessary. So the nurse said, okay, I think you just have to fill out paperwork and you should be able to take her home. And she was like, that's what we do with regular patients. So I don't see, because the NICU's a little bit different because it is a baby. So it's someone under my care versus me being in my own, signing for myself. But so the doctor came in, and at this point, I think Christian had gotten there. So Mom, Dad, my brother, Christian had all come up there ready to get me, basically. Bags were packed, we're ready to go out the door. Like, we were like, forget this, we're getting out of here. So the doctor comes in to talk to me and Christian, and she basically told me, she sits down and she's like, you can't just leave with the baby. So I'm like, what do you mean? It's my baby. I had her. So she tells us basically that if we choose to leave, they'll call CPS on us, that we would be leaving against medical advice, of course, and basically made it sound like we weren't going to get out of the hospital. Like, we would not make it out of the doors. So she told us that the CPS would come in, they would take her away from us, and that we would have to prove that we were worthy parents, basically. So prove to CPS that we were okay to take on a baby. And because we were leaving against medical advice. And at this point, all she was no longer on the dextrose, no longer on the oxygen. She was only on the antibiotics, which we felt were unnecessary. So she was telling us, really more or less, we weren't going to make it out of the hospital with the kid. Like, we weren't going to make it out the door because CPS was going to take our kid away, and we had no choice in the matter. And it didn't matter that I was her mother. It didn't matter that I had birthed her. It didn't matter that my pregnancy was perfect. It mattered that they thought it wasn't the right time, so we had to stay there. So, of course, we go out.
Mind-blowing.
I mean, I had a meltdown. Like, I had been holding it together at this point, but I had a meltdown.
Full blown.
I mean, I was exhausted, and I was so over it. So she offered us, this was on a Saturday, so on Monday, she was going to call to a specialist over at another hospital, which is in the same town, and it was a disease specialist, some kind of infectious disease specialist, and talk to them and see if she thought that we could leave after 7 days, if a 7-day course of antibiotics would be enough. So she was going to do that, and if that disease specialist said yes, then she would allow us to leave after 7 days.
And I just have to insert something right here because I'm about to blow, right? And my daughter, I mean, I was so proud of how she held it together, and she was like, Mom, you just gotta let me handle it, which is...
Well, it was about playing their game. It really was. And I felt...
And she just said, I'm just gonna play nice, I'm gonna play their game, and I'm gonna comply with whatever they say, but I'm not, she wasn't gonna be pushed into doing anything. Anyway, go ahead.
So that was my thing, was just trying to play nice, smile through it, and as much as I didn't, as much as you want to explode on everyone around you, it's the point of trying to get out of there, because at that point, we did feel held hostage. We were within the hospital's care.
We were being held hostage.
I mean,
This was ridiculous.
We were within the hospital's care. They had my baby. I couldn't just pick her up and take her out the door, So, I mean, it really did feel like medical kidnapping. Like, it was ridiculous. It just felt like they were doing something that only they felt was necessary and we didn't. So...
And our opinion was not
not at all.
We had no say.
Yeah.
Because they had to rule stuff out. It was all about ruling stuff out. It was not that she was ever showing any signs of having any of these
symptoms,
things other than
anything. She had no meconium, when she was like, that wasn't in the fluid that she inhaled, which is important. That can cause major infection and issues if they inhale the meconium, but she didn't. She inhaled just amniotic fluid and blood. That's it. That's all that was in her lungs. So we played nice. So I hung out there over the weekend. They continued to bring me food. Everybody came by and visited. On day 6, she called that doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, you know, there's a 30% chance that, because what they were gonna do was do blood work again, and I had to basically acknowledge that there was a 30% chance that I was taking that risk. There was a 30% chance it would be wrong, and she would have spinal meningitis, and she could die, basically. So that if I took my kid home after 7 days, that she could die. That was what I was acknowledging.
But wait, I want to say something that reminds me too, that there were 2 blood tests that were run after the 3rd day, and both times the blood work came back outstanding.
Like, she was perfect. She was perfect at this one. She was drinking my breast milk.
I knew that me juicing was.
Yeah, so she was drinking my breast milk. I mean, it was just, she really was. She was good health. She was doing great. And we could tell, I mean, she just got brighter. Her eyes got brighter. She got more alert. And so I was spending a ton of time with her, doing skin to skin, hanging out with her because I was on this couch with, like, across from her little bassinet. So I had her on my chest a lot. I breastfed her constantly, around the clock pretty much. I was just cluster feeding her as much as she needed, as much as she wanted. So
then they allowed you
to leave. On day 7, so we found out on day 6 that we could leave, talk to the doctor. And, you know, the thing was that was so crazy. She was so nice. She really was. She was nice. But it was such a passive-aggressive type of nice. Such a, I know that you think that you're right, but I'm right, and you should be listening to me because I'm a doctor. Like, that's how it felt so much. And, like, her smiling in our face and telling us that CPS would take our kid, and just like, and, you know, it's just because you're taking a risk and she could die. And it was like, you know, I think you're being a little dramatic. And it was just questioning her authority so much. And us having the gall to even question her, Lord knows. Because this doctor was the head of the neonatal unit. So she was above everybody for the most part in this unit.
She was what is. So anyway, tell them about the nurses.
So
that was huge.
On like the 5th day, I think it was on, like the 5th day on Sunday, this lactation consultant came in. I just had issues with like some sores because I was obviously newly breastfeeding. So this lactation consultant came in and talked to me. She starts talking to me. She goes, well, you know, why is Mia here? So I start explaining to her that I had, you know, refused the vitamin K, etc. And she goes, oh, you're that mother. And I'm like, yeah, that mother, I guess. And she was like, no, she's like, you're one of the smart moms. She's like, just know, like, there are so many of us right now that are rooting for you. Like, we are following what's going on, and we want you to know, like, you are totally supported. Like, what you're doing, we think is right. Like, she shouldn't be here at this point. And so I had told her what the doctor had told us the day before, and she basically told me that's a lie. She was like, that's a lie. She's like, yeah, CPS would open a case. Another thing I was going to do was on Monday was call CPS, because of course we talked to her on Saturday, so nothing's open. But so the nurse was like, you know, that's a lie, basically. She's like, I feel like you're being bullied into staying here. I told her that we may have to stay 14 days is what she was saying. And she told me to talk to her partner. So this other doctor was supposed to come in throughout the rest of the week, basically, and that doctor wouldn't be on call anymore. And so she told me to talk to him, and basically that he was kind of a ninny, more or less, which I guess is why she probably chose him as a
nice
partner.
guy, you know, like maybe somebody that listens as opposed to this other doctor. But anyway,
yeah, so she told me, you know, try, if you can't leave after the 7 days, you know, if that doesn't work out, then talk to this doctor and basically kind of more or less bully him. She's like, because he's a ninny. And she just was like, you know, I just want you to know we're supporting you. Like, we can't speak out, but we are supporting you. Like, we're behind you. And it was nice. It was a good feeling knowing that I wasn't crazy. Because, you know, at this point, being locked in the hospital for days on end with the baby, breastfeeding, watching the year's worth of Netflix. I mean, just, yeah, you start to go crazy. Like, you start to lose it a little bit. You start to feel like maybe I'm not making the right decision. Maybe this isn't right. Like, maybe this doctor is right, because you're locked in this cold box all the time, and you don't, you know, God, you had to get in there. You had to wash your hands for 2 minutes. So to go out to pee, I have to come back in, have time, wash my hands if I wanted to get water. I mean, to leave the unit at all was a feat in and of itself. So it was just, you start to really doubt yourself, because you want to get out so bad, and you want so badly to just go home with your baby. And it's like, you know, what am I doing wrong? But then once you get out in the sunlight, Lord knows, you're like, maybe I'm not crazy. But at the time, you really do. So having the reassurance from that nurse, from that lactation consultant, helped a lot.
That was really a gift.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was an answered prayer too, about just, you know, is what I'm doing right now. Am I making the right choice kind of thing? So it was good. It helped a lot. So we were finally on day 7 able to go home at like 5 o'clock. Had to do blood work. Everything had to come back perfect for them to release us. But when we got out, we hauled ass. I mean, truly, we did. We hauled ass.
Never to return.
Going past that hospital, I have PTSD still. Like, I could never go in there again. I mean, I will have a home birth for sure for the next one. I 100% will choose home birth.
So I think, you know, we can wrap this video up, but I just wanted you to know her experience. The manipulation is real. The mind control is real. I mean, this is what's going on in our health care system. It's just pathetic. And anyway, I just hope this helps anyone out there that's going to go to the hospital and have a birth. That you brace yourself, that you be prepared to be in battle.
I mean, truly, as prepared as I was, yeah.
I don't think we really weren't prepared for battle, because
we were not for a NICU battle. God, I was, you know, you're so caught up in the birthing process that when it comes down to it, like, it just doesn't compare. I just, you know, that was my worst fear, was that happening. And it did happen. And we got through it, thank God, but it had to happen.
I really saw hands-on why America is such an incredibly, you know, dangerous place. It's one of the worst, absolute worst places to give birth of any developed country. I think it is the worst place to give birth.
And
I saw hands-on why, because we were treating this baby for all kind of wide open things. It's like, her daddy said, you know, it's kind of like if something wrong with my Jeep and I just start throwing tools at it, you know, and I just hope that I'm going to hit something. I mean, that's what we felt like. We felt like this baby was like a target, you know. It was insane. So speaking of the baby daddy, he is here and the dogs are fixing to go off. So we're going to sign off now. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Any questions, don't hesitate to get in contact with me. All right. Love you all. Caroline, can you hit the off button there? All right.
I sure can.